What's up, guys? Welcome to a new day. I'm Stephanie Ryder, and this is the 365 Shares podcast. It's January 16th, 2024, and this is the 16th episode of the 365 Shares podcast. Today's topic is hitting bottom. And the ACA Big Red Book says, all bottoms have meaning, and all bottoms can be a starting point for a new way of life. There is hope. Healing is possible. So today I went and saw the new Mean Girls musical movie, the movie based on the Broadway musical based on the movie, and it was great. And I think that is a really great example of a rock bottom situation. We all tend to think of rock bottoms as an alcoholic or like a drug addicted bottom or like some type of gambling bottom where we're like, have a DUI or we lose all our money or, we like lose all our relationships and our jobs and all this kind of stuff. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that dramatic. And I think Mean Girls is actually a great example of hitting bottom because for the main character, she builds up this popularity and this whole plan to like take what she wants and then has it all come crashing down because the methods that she used to get there were not sound and they were like she was not being honest and she was manipulating people. So kind of a good metaphor for codependency where she wanted what she wanted and she wanted to change everyone else's behavior until she could have what she wanted. And then she kind of loses everything and is forced to really look at herself and go back to the person, more of her true self, who she really is. And only then is the situation kind of resolved. So I think that's a great example. The passage in the Strengthening My Recovery book talks about feeling like we've hit a bottom because life didn't go the way we wanted it to, and getting to this place where we realize we have to change because our life didn't work out or we were blindsided by something that we thought we'd already dealt with. And it says that it doesn't just have to be like this one big tragic situation that's your bottom. You can have multiple situations where you don't handle something well or you have things go wrong. And there are a lot of opportunities to kind of hit a new low or just a different low after you've been doing well for a while and use that to come back to your recovery. The affirmation for today is, on this day, when I slip so far that I think I can't see daylight, I will not abandon myself. I will look at my situation as another opportunity for growth in this program. And I think that's really great. I've gone through a lot of iterations of my therapy and my recovery. I typically work with therapists for a year and a half until I sort of get everything I can out of that process. And then I look for another one. And I'm not just looking for someone to give me different answers. I'm doing a different modality of therapy. I'm working on a different problem or childhood memory or trauma or pattern of behavior. And I think there are levels in ACA as well where the first time I went to a meeting a few years ago, I was really there because I was in a relationship and I primarily thought my partner at the time needed ACA. And of course I needed it too, but like whatever gets you there, if you only go to a meeting because you think it would really help your partner and then you sit and listen and realize that it's resonating for you too, then that's great. Like be codependent enough to find yourself in a meeting and then be self-aware enough to stay in the meeting and realize that it also applies to you. So that's kind of how I started my ACA journey, like thinking it would be helpful for someone else, but just internalizing it, and then went back into it in earnest a little over a year ago. It was November of 22. And just to tackle things that were going on with me, a lot of things in my family, because I have a lot of people in my family who are or were dependent on substances. And even when they are sober, the behavior doesn't always change and the thought processes don't always change. So it's really helped me understand why people in my family do certain things. And it also has really shown me through not only the readings, but observing the different people and the different types of people that are in ACA, how many different ways all of us can adapt to traumatic situations, dysfunctional families. Some people become very, very authoritarian, very aggressive, very angry. Some people become very timid, meek, mild, terrified. So it's interesting to see, and it helps me kind of understand. Like I remember my grandmother used to always say, it's so weird that, kids can be raised in the same family, but one person likes pickles and one person hates tomatoes, and, just commenting on people's different taste bud preferences. But people also have different coping mechanisms that they develop within the same families because of just their DNA or their personality or the roles that they had to play in the family or the specific things that were done to them that are nuanced from the similar things that were done to other members of their family. So I think that's a helpful part of being empathetic, is like, just because someone's not treating you well, it's not necessarily that they're sick and you're healthy. Maybe they maladapted a different way than you did. And those coping mechanisms are conflicting and contributing to hurt feelings. And because someone didn't cope with something the same way that you coped with something, it doesn't mean that they're worse or that they're attacking you. That's just all they learned how to do. So it helps me to know that. And I feel like all these little, every time I have like a big fight with my partner, that's like a little bit of a bottom, but those are getting so much better. When I have conflict with my family of origin, that feels like a bottom, but it also feels like I'm rock climbing a little bit, and like maybe you slip and you fall down a few feet, but you're still 30 feet higher than you were when you started. So you have to put it in perspective. And it comes back to that, what the numerologist said I should say every day: I am grateful. So I'm grateful for all of my bottoms. And I always do laugh because it is kind of funny, but I'm thankful for all my bottoms. Bottoms are great. And everything that I've learned from them so far. I'm Steph, and this is my share. I'll talk a little bit about my biggest bottom, and that was the end of my marriage. And for a little bit of context, I was really in love with my ex-husband when we met. And for the first few years, things were really great. And I married him because he was the best boyfriend in a lot of ways. Things did start to deteriorate, but the more problems we had and the more challenges we faced, the sort of worse my partner's behavior got, the worse my behavior got, because I was always trying to corral him, as codependents do, and keep him from drinking too much or keep us from having a fight, keep his health from deteriorating, like all these little things that I felt like I had to manage that were taking time away from me and working on myself. And I was working full time. I was going to yoga all the time. We had friends, we had activities, we traveled. So it's not like I was just sitting home, waiting for him to come home. I had my own life to live. But the farther we got into our relationship and the worse things got, the deeper I got into trying to keep my finger in the dam, was really how I felt all the time. And we tried to get pregnant for a long time. We tried for probably a year and a half. Saw a fertility doctor. They said nothing was really wrong. We just kept trying. Finally, after a year and a half, I got pregnant. Had a miscarriage at 11 weeks, which is right before the 12-week mark, when you're usually statistically in the clear and you can start telling people. So that was a big disappointment, really devastating. But more than that, we had a big fight because he was not being supportive emotionally, and he just couldn't. He didn't have anything to give, and had a big fight, and I kicked him out, and then we had a rocky few weeks or months, and then he informed me that we were getting divorced, and he didn't want to go to couples counseling. He didn't want to work on anything. So now I'm mourning this child that we were supposed to have. Now I don't have a husband anymore, and we are going to have to sell our condo that I loved, and then our cat got sick, and we had to put her down. I had to put her down. So it was a lot of loss in a very short period of time. And on top of that, my family of origin was not supportive of me. They honestly were on my husband's side, which I thought was the most appalling thing that had ever happened to anyone. And I'm sure it happens to a lot of people all the time, but it's not something I ever expected. And my grandfather had been dead for a few years at that point, at least 5 probably. And he would have totally handled things, and he would have, if he hadn't been able to work things out with my ex-husband and I, he at least would have supported me in the way that I needed. So it was just like the whole world crumbled for me. And my mental health was really bad. I was really suicidal. And I had a few different people tell me that I was codependent. I had someone tell me I needed to read Codependent No More, the subtitle of which is How to Stop Controlling Others and Start Taking Care of Yourself. And I just really had to face that I had contributed to the deterioration of my marriage. And that was really hard to do because in my mind, it was mostly his fault. And at the end of the day, you can't blame one person for what happens. It takes two to tango, and both people contribute to the relationship. So I think that was really my bottom, in the sense that I had to get into therapy and answer the question that all these therapists started asking me, which is, why did you pick him? He sounds so horrible. And so then I had to get into like, what's my family like? And why was he familiar to me? And how did our relationship reopen old wounds? And what were those wounds? And can we heal those wounds? And how do we do that? And it takes a really long time and it's painful. All these questions. But my biggest bottom really was my marriage deteriorating. And I was suicidal. I was making little like promises to myself and deals with God. Like, one of them was, I have a lot of family from Chicago and my grandparents were born in Chicago. So one of them was when the Cubs were in the World Series. I made a deal with God that if they won the World Series, which would be like the first time in 100 years or something, that I wouldn't kill myself. And they won the World Series, so I didn't kill myself, kept my promise. And then after that, it was, if I can just make it to 40, that was all I really had to do. Like, I didn't have to live the rest of my life because I was in so much pain and I just didn't want to start over and I didn't want to live. And I told myself, just get to 40, because 40 is how old my mom was when she died. And that was just my goalpost for a while. And it felt more manageable and it felt like a deal that I could make of like, all I have to do is make it to 40. And because thinking about living an entire rest of my life and doing all the things that you have to do if you live an entire life, like find another partner and go back to trying to have kids and like raise the kids and have a career and get to retirement and all these things, like that felt impossible and inconceivable. So I just told myself, just get to 40. And I did get to 40 this past year. And my overwhelming feeling when I got to 40 was just so thankful, because I was just in a really good place, had a fun birthday, felt healthy and happy. And I was like, I'm so happy to be here, because for a while it seemed like I would never make it here. 40 seemed so far away when I was mourning my marriage and my baby and my cat and my condo and my group of friends, which we had a lot of mutual friends, and that whole thing was fractured, not necessarily because anyone took his side over mine, but because I didn't trust anybody anymore, because I felt like everyone was kind of in on it. And there was some paranoia, but there really was some element of, he told some of our friends, and really who had been my friends, his plans before he told me, and they didn't clue me in. So there was really just a lot of betrayal and lack of trust. And it was like, there were so many things that I had. And then a few months later, I didn't have any of it. But I will say that what really got me into therapy in earnest and really starting to do the hard work was that I was in so much pain that I felt like I was physically dying. And not just being dramatic, not just I'm, in emotional pain. I felt like I was going to stop breathing. I felt like my organs were going to shut down and I would just lay down and cease to be alive. And it was that fear of just physically dying, like being in so much emotional pain that you die, that was the catalyst I needed to deal with all of the trauma and all of the emotions and all of the unhealthy behaviors, because you have to be between a rock and a hard place, and you have to have something that's so much worse happening to you than what you're trying to face. And I was just talking to a girlfriend tonight, and she and her partner are taking a break, and he moved out and decided to move in with his mom for a while. And he comes from a dysfunctional family as well. And we were just kind of saying like, it's the best thing for him. She was like, he's doing so much work in therapy right now, and like really just hearing things that I've been saying for months to him. And now he's suddenly like getting it and hearing it when his therapist says it to him. And it makes sense, because he had to be back into the fire, like literally going back to his family of origin to heal the damage caused by his family of origin, instead of just recreating little melodramas and acting out plays with his girlfriend, of pain and hurt that wasn't caused by her. He's just going to the source, and he's finding so much work that he's able to do now and healing that he's able to do now, because he's like, he didn't want to hear that thing before that his girlfriend was saying. But now that he's in so much conflict and in like a position where he's an adult who's living with his mom, and he has to deal with it. This is not a sustainable place for him to live for the rest of his life. So like his only choice, it's sink or swim at this point, and his only choice is to do the hard work and to heal and to dive in. So bottoms are great. We're supportive of bottoms, whatever yours is. I don't wish anything painful on anyone, but if you are in a situation where you're in so much pain that the only option is a meeting, or the only option is therapy, or the only option is a massive change in your life, then I'm grateful for you for that, because this is where the magic happens.